Very serendipitously, I'm making a video on how to really understand people at a deep level so you can elevate your communication and therefore get what you want. And I just got an email back from one of my executive level clients who is signing the terms of business that I sent to him and my recruitment job because I understood his personality type. I got straight to the point, and now he's agreeing to the terms because he liked how I worked, basically, because I communicated in a way that works really well with him. Love it. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Bethany, and I work with women to help them to deepen their feminine energy, to do inner work and personal growth so that they can get what they want in life and become more beautiful, incredible versions of themselves. So by night, I am a feminine mastery coach, basically, meaning I help women to really connect with their feminine energy through many, many different ways. But during the day, I am an IT recruitment consultant. Please excuse my microphone. I have 3 children and my youngest ran off with the sponge. So I taped random sponge that I found onto my microphone. Flexibility. Anyway, so through my corporate role during the day, I work with executives all day long. And one of the things that I've noticed about the most successful executives that I work with and the things that I've implemented myself to become more successful and to have higher quality relationships is the way that they really observe people, understand people at a really deep level, and also understand themselves at a very deep level. Because when you understand yourself and other people very, very well, you are able to alter your communication to help them understand what it is that you're after, and you can also help to understand what it is that they're after, because almost every interaction that you're having with other people is some kind of a negotiation. And if you don't understand yourself very well and you don't understand others very well, you're not going to be good at the actual negotiation aspect. So what I'm going to be taking you through today is some very science-backed methods for really understanding people, as well as some that aren't maybe as favored by the psychological community, but they're fun and I love it. So we'll dive into those too, because I've personally found them to be very accurate. So the first is called the Big 5 personality model, or the ocean model. So you have 5 different personality traits or characteristics, and this is highly science-backed. So when I did my psychology degree a few years ago, almost every test that I took, almost every report that I turned in was all based around the Big 5 model, because it is continuously increasing in popularity and because it has been found to be so accurate across every culture, across every human being. So every person is on a different spectrum with these 5 different personality traits. And the reason this is important to know is if you have somebody who is on one end of the spectrum and you are on the complete opposite side of the spectrum and you are trying to communicate and figure out what you both want and figure out what your aspirations are in life, if you're trying to negotiate terms of business like I did this morning, anything that you're trying to do, if you're not speaking their language, they're not going to understand you. I saw this brilliant quote the other day, which I cannot fully quote because I have not Googled it, but if we fly by the seat of our pants here, it was something along the lines of, anybody that you speak with is viewing your words through their own lens, which is very, very true. So if you are speaking one language and they're viewing it through their own lens, which every human being is, they're not going to understand what it is that you're saying. So you have to learn how to change and tweak the way that you communicate with people so that they understand what it is that you're trying to get across. So the first personality trait is openness to experience. So this has to do with how open a person is to novel ideas and art and creative thinking. It's basically how creative they are, how curious they are about creativity and change and things like that. So if you are, for example, somebody that is very open to new experiences and you're speaking with somebody who is quite change averse, quite risk averse, you're going to be speaking 2 very different languages. So the way to tell if somebody is higher in openness to experience is if they talk a lot about travel, new adventures. If you ask them what they did on the weekend and they say something along the lines of, oh, I tried this new restaurant and then I went to this art exhibition, you'll start to notice that they are generally more creative and more open to new things. So if you're speaking with somebody that is very high in openness to experience, they'll generally talk about how they went to art exhibitions on the weekend, or they like to try new things. If you go out on a date, for example, and you notice them saying, oh, I haven't tried this before, I'm going to try it, they are likely higher in the openness to experience arena. Next is conscientiousness, and this is, in a professional sense, probably one of the most important ones to know, because if you are low in conscientiousness and you're constantly working with professionals that are higher in conscientiousness, you're going to run into some trouble unless you understand how to tweak meetings and your language to make sure that you're always on the same page. And same with partners. Often partners on opposite ends of the spectrum are attracted to each other. So you'll end up with somebody who is low in conscientiousness. Maybe they like things to be more relaxed. They don't like plans. They don't like having everything fully laid out. They're okay if they turn up a little bit late. It's like, it's not the end of the world. And then somebody who's higher in conscientiousness is going to want things to be on time and just so. They're generally a little bit more inflexible. That's me. I'm very high in conscientiousness. I'm 93% in conscientiousness. If somebody runs late, it really irritates me. It frustrates me so much. So if you are somebody, for example, who is low in conscientiousness, you find that you don't care too much about being on time, organization, all of that, that's a beautiful thing. All of that comes with its own benefits. But if you're working with people that are high in conscientiousness, you should consistently be showing up on time. I mean, you should no matter what, but if you know that you're meeting up with a client who's equally relaxed as you are, maybe it doesn't matter. If you have friends that are equally as relaxed as you are, it really doesn't matter if you're 10 minutes late, 20 minutes late, they're not going to care. But you need to look out for those specific aspects in people, because if you're trying to build professional relationships, if you're trying to deepen your friendships or your connection with your partner and you don't understand where they sit on that spectrum, you're just gonna be giving each other anxiety all day long, which means there's no way to really connect. Next is extroversion. So extroversion is, it's funny because the definition of it varies a little bit. My viewpoint of introversion versus extroversion is introverts might be people that might be happy going out. They may even be okay going to parties, but they need more alone time in order to recharge. They recharge with alone time, whereas extroverts recharge with time with people. So it's where they get their energy from. Now, because extroversion is one of the traits that we're looking at, the way that they measure this is your level of sociability. Like, how much do you like going out and seeing people? They measure it by your level of assertiveness in conversation and your actions with people. And they measure it by how high you are in positive emotions, essentially. So that's a little bit different than maybe the classic psychological viewpoint of extroversion. So for example, for me, I think I was 60-something% in extroversion. I know that I'm an introvert. Technically, according to that, I'm an extrovert, a higher on the extroversion scale. But all that really means is I like people. I'm more positive on the emotion spectrum. I'm happy to go out to parties. It's just that I am not super high there because I still need the alone time to recharge. If you have friends that are lower on the spectrum of extroversion, it means that they like to be at home more. It means that they recharge with quiet time, with one-on-one time, or by being alone. That's how they recharge their batteries. So if you are super high in the extroversion scale and you're constantly trying to get certain friends to go out, or in a professional sense, if you have a client that you want to take out for dinner and they've had an absolutely mental week, they might not want to do that. So you'll know, okay, let's check their calendar. Let's see what they're actually doing that week. Are they going to have enough juice in their batteries to go and do, say, a dinner out or a coffee catch-up after they've been traveling all week? So things like that are really important to know. The next trait we have is agreeableness. So agreeableness, kind of like it sounds, is basically how agreeable somebody is. Are they more empathetic? Are they more nurturing? Are they a little bit more self-sacrificing? And the reason this is important to know is, so again, I'll view it from a personal and also a professional sense. If you're walking into a negotiation with somebody who is higher in agreeableness, you're probably going to have a much easier time than somebody who is very low in agreeableness. So when I was doing the negotiations this morning, where that client was happy with what I put forward, he's lower in agreeableness. He just wants stuff done. He likes to move fast. He's not necessarily the most nurturing, empathetic guy, which is why it's part of why he's successful. Oftentimes when you're lower in agreeableness, you are more successful in business. Not always, but oftentimes. Having said that, times are changing. Regardless, if you are negotiating with somebody that's lower in agreeableness, you need to figure out exactly what's driving them and just get it done. They don't want to sit there and have a chat about family and all these other things. They generally don't want to go back and forth too much either, because they're not so much focused on, say, the personal aspect of things. People that are lower in agreeableness are aiming for efficiency. They also tend to be more skeptical. So normally if somebody is lower in agreeableness, you want to make sure that you're giving them the right amount of information. I did this, and so this happened, done. You don't want to put all the emotions into it. Whereas somebody that's higher in agreeableness, they want that connection. They are more nurturing and empathetic, so they want to spend more time getting to know you. It's really good to know this with friends too. And with all of these, either end of the spectrum, there are benefits of both. So like I said, somebody that's lower in agreeableness is going to be more skeptical. You want people like that in your circle because they're the ones that are going to say, you're talking to that guy, there's something fishy. Whereas somebody that's very high in agreeableness might be more naive and that might pass right over them. So there's no necessary good and evil in any of these traits. It's more to do with the combination and the best way to communicate with them. But somebody that's higher in agreeableness, if you have a super agreeable person in your inner circle of friends, for example, they might be somebody who doesn't speak out for themselves quite as much. They might have a tendency, unless they have done training on like boundaries and learned how to really dive into respect for themselves, unless they've done all of that work, they might be easily walked over. So that's normally the one that you want to keep an eye on in group situations. If everybody in your group is trying to agree on where to go for dinner, you might make sure that you ask the person that's really high in agreeableness where they want to go to help them learn to speak up for themselves. Same thing with if you have children. If you have a child that's very agreeable, they might be easier to push over, which means that they might have more trouble becoming confident later in life because they spend so much time learning to be a good girl or a good boy, for example. So you want to keep an eye on this too. Their personality traits in children are really, really important to how they develop later. How you develop them dictates how they develop themselves later. And then lastly is neuroticism, which is basically emotional stability. Now, like I said, all of these have positive and negatives. So somebody who is higher in neuroticism is more susceptible to anxiety, depression, what we normally think of as more negative moods. They are also more suspicious of people, kind of like those that are lower in agreeableness. However, you want those that have a level of neuroticism in your life and if you have it yourself, this can also be a very good thing. Because when you're more neurotic, you're more sensitive to things. So if you have a partner, for example, that is generally bold and makes big moves and just wants to get stuff done quickly, and you are higher in neuroticism, you're more likely to look at the negative aspects of things, which means you're more likely to uncover anything that is suspicious, anything that you should be skeptical about. If you're higher in neuroticism, you're also more likely to burn out, which means you are more likely in your company, in your friendship group, whatever, to call out things that maybe aren't okay. And again, this can be a very positive thing because people that constantly cover up things that need to actually be worked on, people that don't call out things that are happening, normally those people are the ones that burn out. They end up with good girl syndrome, they end up with perfectionism, and they don't end up being as happy. So ironically, if you're higher in neuroticism, even though you might experience more mood swings, more negative emotions, you are also more likely to put the right things in place, the right boundaries, and have the right standards that will lead to more joy in life as well. So both sides of the spectrum are positive. If you have somebody in your life that is highly neurotic, you want to be very careful how you approach them when you have something to deal with, because if they're very neurotic and they haven't worked on their level of emotional maturity, if you have any kind of a disagreement with them, it's unlikely to go well unless you are the calm force in that conversation, unless you are the calm waters amongst their storms. So you want to be really careful how you approach people with negative circumstances when they're high in neuroticism. Now, the next one is not as science-backed, and the psychological community is kind of split with how they view this personality test, but I personally love it, and I found it to be consistently accurate with everybody that's ever taken the test and actually knows what they are. So it's the MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs test. This was made by two followers of Carl Jung. So Carl Jung was one of the founding fathers of psychology. He was incredible. He had a lot of really in-depth work on inner child healing, on shadow work, so how to uncover the sides of yourself that are either darker or that maybe you didn't even know existed. So these can be positive traits too. He did a lot of work on dreams and their meanings and stories and their meaning and archetypes. He created archetypes. I have a course called the 7 Feminine Archetypes, for example, which is all about the different kind of personas of womanhood and where you can categorize yourself in and how to connect with each of those. All of that is based on a level of his work. So he was fantastic. He spoke about the traits that you'll hear me speak about in a minute, and then two of his followers basically created the Myers-Briggs test. So there's 4 different traits in the Myers-Briggs test. You're either going to be on one side of the spectrum or the other. And then depending on which side of the spectrum you're on, which each of those 4 traits, you'll get a series of 4 letters. And those letters dictate what your personality type is. So for me, for example, I'm an INFJ. You can be an ISTP. You can be an ESTP. So you get a combination of 4 different letters to make up 16 different personality types. So with this one, this is harder to quantify when meeting people because it's more complex than the big 5. So this is more one where if you take this personality test yourself, you'll be able to understand yourself at a deeper level. And if you have those in your circle, if you meet those professionally that have taken this test too, I've met many clients throughout my recruitment career that know what the MBTI is. They know their type, they've taken it. There's even some companies that have had all of their staff take this test. They can all learn how to interact with each other to increase productivity. So you'll run across people that know what theirs are. You might not be able to always pinpoint what somebody's type is, but if you take it yourself, you'll be able to look out for clues on how to interact with other people and the best way to communicate with them. So the first is introversion versus extroversion. Now this one goes by the more classic, in my view, classic definition of introversion versus extroversion, which is, do you recharge by alone time or do you recharge by time with people? So you either be closer on one side of the spectrum or the other. The next is sensing versus intuition. And the easiest way, there's so many different definitions of this, the easiest way that I found to explain this is those that are more towards the sensing side of things, they need data in front of them. They tend to be more analytical. They want to see all of the facts and figures in front of them before making a decision. So with people like that, more information is really key. If you have clients that are like that, you'll notice that they're constantly talking about data and asking for more information and asking why. So with people like that, anytime you need them to make a decision, you want to be dumping info in front of them to help them make that decision because they want to be able to sit through it themselves. The other side is intuition. So you're either sensing or you're intuitive. People on the intuition side of things, they go more with gut feel. Generally, they take information and they just process it very quickly. Sometimes that means that they don't process thoroughly enough. They don't make decisions with enough information, and that can get them into trouble. But oftentimes, and this is very interesting with executives, oftentimes it just means you make big moves faster without overthinking because you're processing information quicker and you trust your gut feel with it. So people that are more on the intuitive side of things, they are more open to making mistakes. They'd rather fail fast and hard so that they can open up more opportunities for themselves. Another way to look at it is it's almost like logic versus intuition. So those that are closer to the sensing side of the spectrum, they like cold hard facts, and those that are closer to the intuition side of the spectrum are more open to looking at patterns and possibility and going with their gut. Next is thinking versus feeling. So this is kind of similar in a way to sensing versus intuition. So thinkers, as the word would suggest, they tend to focus more on logic, and feelers tend to focus more on emotions. So if you were in a professional sense, for example, when it comes to making decisions, a thinker would say what's best for the company overall, regardless of whose feelings it hurts, of who has to get laid off, etc. What will save this company, what will create innovation within this company, what will help us with the bottom line. Whereas a feeler would say, how does this affect specific individuals? How do they feel about that? Is this going to cause crisis in somebody's life or hurt? And there's a place for both. Both have their benefits. Last is judging versus perceiving. This is similar to conscientiousness, like the Big Five factor model conscientiousness. So those that are higher in trait judging, it's not that they're actually judgmental, although often conscientious people and people that are closer to the judging side of things with the MBTI, often they are judging those that aren't as organized. That's not where that would come from, but those that are higher on the judging side, they tend to be more organized, on time. They want things to be a certain way. They really like structure, planning, closure, all of that. They need answers and they need things to be just so. Whereas those that are more towards the perceiving side of things, they are more flexible. They're open to going with the flow. They're happy to fly by the seat of their pants and see what happens. They tend to be more adventurous. So again, this is super similar to conscientiousness, basically. If you look at all those personality traits, you're going to have a combination of 4 letters from them. So like I said, I'm an INFJ. If you take the test yourself, you can Google something called 16 personalities. That's a free test that you can take online. I'll link it down below as well. It's very interesting how just combining 4 different traits will give you such an in-depth analysis on what your personality is likely like. It will talk to you about what your motivations are like, what you're like romantically, what you're like in friendships and in the workplace. And I have yet to meet somebody who said that theirs isn't very accurate. Now, if you can get yourself to the point where you really study yourself, so you really truly understand yourself deeply, where you can get very introspective, you can look at your motivations for things, you can look at why you like things to be a certain way, what your level of flexibility is in life, what makes you happy, sad, what you value the most in life. When you start to really get introspective and understand yourself, you'll start to understand other people better too. And one of the best ways to learn how to really understand other people is to listen. Every successful executive that I have worked with, and when I say successful, I mean highly successful, working at huge blue chip organizations, making $500,000 a year. When I'm speaking to people like that, they are excellent at listening and at observing. So regardless of where they fall in any of those personality types that I mentioned, on the spectrum of any of those personality traits, they are able to listen in depth before speaking and before making decisions. And the reason they do that is because they're observing the person that they're speaking to before they speak or before they make decisions. And this is important because if you don't understand the person in front of you, you can't negotiate with them, you can't deepen a relationship with them, and you can't communicate with them in a way that they're even going to hear you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this helps you to understand yourself better, to understand other people better, and to use that to build better relationships and get what you want, because that's what we're here for. If you can please like, comment, and subscribe, that would be amazing. And also, by the way, if you want to get to know yourself very well, and not just like this, not just your personality traits, but if you want to learn how to do things like inner child healing, how to build your confidence to the nth degree, how to elevate your communication, all of that. If you want to learn how to do that, I have a course called Queen Energy. I will link it for you down below, as well as the 7 feminine archetypes course that I mentioned. And I'll see you soon.